The Electoral Commission has assured South Africans that voting will take place without any hindrance. This follows concerns that IEC employees are threatening to go on strike on Wednesday due to unresolved labour issues. We cross now to Tsepiso Makwetla, who is at the election centre, the results centre for us in Pretoria. Tsepiso, good evening to you. I know you've got two special guests with you there tonight.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Stephen, and a very good evening to you and our viewers. As you said, we are broadcasting live from the ROC, the Results Operations Centre of the IEC here at the Pretoria Showgrounds, or Event Centre as it's called. And I'm right next to the leaderboard, which you will see here to my right, when on Wednesday, 9 p.m, that's really going to light up and start showing us where people voted, how they voted, and of course we'll be looking at all of those critical figures. But elections wouldn't be much without election observers and monitors, and today we are joined by the head of mission of ASA, that is the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy. He himself a former president, President Goodluck Jonathan of Nigeria, and he joins us this evening to tell us what they think of the process thus far. Mr. President, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Let's first start with your observer mission. What have been your observations, so to speak, of how the Electoral Institute of South Africa has run this campaign so far?
Thank you, and I'm pleased to lead the ISA observation mission in these good elections that are coming up in South Africa. You know, this year's election appears to be one of the strongest contested elections so far in the history of South African democracy, and everybody's interested in the outcome. For ISA, we've been doing very well. We've interacted with key stakeholders, including the Independent Electoral Commission, the security, because at Pretoria, where the Police Joint Operations Center, we were well briefed. We've interacted with some of the political parties, not all yet. We have observed some of the rallies, and we are quite comfortable how things are going.
The SADC Observer Mission launched its mission last week, and one of the concerns they raised was about security, especially around areas where there have been xenophobic violence or attacks. Do you share such concerns?
Yes, in our interactions with the police team that briefed us, all those issues were raised, the issues of xenophobic reactions, and also some of the crises that we have in places like the George and others, and including the KwaZulu area that people were reacting. And we've noticed, they said, yes, there are areas where you have tension. Some are limited to issues of facilities, and so not necessarily linked to even politics or the election. But we have been assured that the police, they know these gray areas, and they have mobilized a team to monitor and make sure that things don't get out of hand. In fact, the police will be deploying about 51,000 officers across, and that is quite a huge number. And we believe that they will be able to manage the crisis.
President Jonathan, let's now get into the nitty-gritties of elections, the machinations, and obviously perceptions of corruption. And I mean, within the electoral system, we heard reports earlier on that there were several boxes of election material that was stolen. And just offhand, how difficult or easy would it be for an incumbent or someone empowered to rig elections?
Well, managing elections is quite challenging, and sometimes if you stay outside and look at what they do, you may see it differently. In South Africa, where you have about 26.7 registered voters, and they have elections taking place across the country, about 22,924 centers. It's huge to manage such elections. So you will hear some of these stories that the Independent Electoral Commission have assured us that they were going to do their best. And also the stakeholders, the political parties, few of them that we have interacted with, have confidence in them. The key thing about election is the body managing the election. Here, the Independent Electoral Commission. and of course the security, the police. And if the stakeholders, the political parties, have confidence in these two organizations, then of course we are quite hopeful. But of course there is some issues about at the local level, the provincial level and the local level, that some of the officials probably may compromise. But I think on the average, they express confidence in the electoral management body, the Independent Electoral Commission.
And I want to reflect on Nigeria's past elections, the transparency and independence of the electoral system of the commission is very, very important. There were questions raised about your INEC's independence and whether or not they themselves stood up to scrutiny. What are your thoughts? Why do people sometimes lack belief or just don't think that electoral systems are credible in Africa?
Generally, I cannot comment on the Nigerian elections because unfortunately I did not participate as an observer in the elections, although as a citizen I was there. So it will not be fair for me to...
No, I understand. I'm just thinking about the conjecture.
Yes, but generally in Africa, yes, those sentiments are there, but on the average, the management of elections is improving across the continent. I've gone to quite a number of African countries, leading observation mission, ASA, AU, Commonwealth, NDI, and so on. And I'm quite impressed and very hopeful that the standard of managing our elections is improving. And yes, we may not get 100%. Of course, it's always difficult to have a perfect election anywhere in the world, but I think the standard is improving, and we must be happy with that.
And I know I'm putting you in another corner here, asking you to judge other leaders, but it's only fair to ask a former president. I mean, when you conceded defeat, you were lauded by some for standing up to that leadership model. And there is this perception, this lament that African leaders are staying in power for too long. Your thoughts on that?
Of course, I'm not too worried about African leaders staying in power for too long. To me, what worries me is the standard of elections. I believe that if we improve our standards and the citizens using their ballot papers can remove a leader they feel that is not leading them well, that's where we should be interested. Sometimes we sing about people staying too long. Well, there are some countries in Africa that the constitutions are very standard. Of course, pattern after the US, where you have either 4 years of double tenure of maximum 8 years, or like in South Africa here, you have 5 years of double tenure of 10 years. So the trend is changing. I remember that even when Macky Sall became president in Senegal, he has to reduce from 7 years to 5 years. And it's a young African leader. So we must commend such steps. We should not always look at the areas where we feel things are not okay, but generally.
But Mr. President, you would agree that youth participation then plays a major role, and I'm looking at a country like Nigeria. Your youth have launched the Not Too Young to Run campaign in acknowledgement of the fact that there are not enough spaces for young leaders to go into governance. What needs to improve? Do older men need to step aside?
Well, elections are free for everybody. At least the laws do not give age limit that you contest any position. But I'm happy that in South Africa here, from the age of 18, you can contest any position. You are not limited, because I try to ask questions. Yes, in Nigeria, there were limited there is limits for various levels of election, from local council elections up to the state parliament, the governors, and of course at the national level of House of Representatives, the Senate, Vice President, President. But because of the agitation by young people, like you mentioned, the not too young to run movement, I think even the national parliament brought down the age limits. And I think it's no longer a major issue. But the issue of leadership in Africa is not about the age. There are some people who are much older that are doing wonderfully well. So it has to do with the individual. If good leadership does not depend on the age alone. Yes, we agree that in a society where this knowledge-based economy, where you have to belong to the high tech, you need some reasonable information and competence about using IT to know what is happening globally, and so you're able to manage your country. And the young people are more exposed than the older ones. So on that basis, yes, there's clamor for young leaders, but the key thing is leading our countries well.
All right, thank you very much.
Age.
Thank you very much for joining us, President Goodluck Jonathan, former Nigerian president and head of the IEC Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa Observer Mission here at the ROC Center. And of course, we'll be talking to the IEC Chief Electoral Officer, Sai Mamabolo, later on to find out whether or not everything is in place. As you know, those who applied for special votes have already started voting, and that is 770,000 of them. We'll find out from him how that is progressing shortly. We'll be back.